We want to begin with what's happening around the U.S. We have some anger and frustration in the wake of the death of George Floyd. So our first question for you, Senators, is from Amanda in Grand Rapids. And she wants to know, what resources will you use to determine the best way to eradicate systemic racism in our country? And Senator Peters, we will begin with you.
Well, thank you. And it is an incredibly important question, particularly after the horrific incident and the murder of George Floyd. Certainly all of our hearts go out to the family, and we understand that, unfortunately, this is not something that happens occasionally. It happens time and time again all across our country, and we have to deal with the systemic issues underlying racism and the criminal justice system that has not performed in a way that is equitable. That in this country, everybody, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, should be treated equally under the law. There are a number of things we need to do, although one particular effort that I've been engaged in is to create a national commission on criminal justice. Actually, this was something that was done 50 years ago during a very difficult time in our history in the 1960s, and a need to take a comprehensive look at the criminal justice system. Over 200 recommendations came out of that commission. Most all of them were adopted. We made major changes. Some of them were fairly straightforward, like when you dial 911 on your phone. That actually came out from the Criminal Justice Commission 50 years ago. Well, a lot has happened in 50 years, and we still have a long ways to go, and we need to revisit that. In fact, after the horrible events in Ferguson and President Obama's report that came out, their top recommendation was to have this kind of broad commission that'll do a complete look. And the bill that I've introduced, and we actually passed it in the Senate in the last session, and we'll hopefully pass it again and send it over to the House, has broad bipartisan support. My bill has 20 co-sponsors, roughly half Republicans, half Democrats. I've got the support of every major group associated with the criminal justice issue. That means all of the major civil rights groups, the NAACP, the Urban League, National Action Network, as well as all the major law enforcement groups representing police officers and prosecutors. It's important to get everybody around the table and put together a comprehensive plan to deal with all of the aspects of the criminal justice system. It's complex. We have to deal with it in a comprehensive way, and we have to have the political will to get it done. And the way to do that is to do it in a bipartisan way and get everybody together from across the ideological spectrum. We've done it before in this country. We did it 50 years ago. It wasn't perfect, but it moved us in the right direction. We need to do it again, and now is the time to make it happen.
Senator Stabenow, in the wake of the death of George Floyd and the reaction that we've seen around the nation and right here in our state, what can you do from a federal level to try to heal some of that pain and try to end some of the systemic racism?
Well, Rick, it's great to be with you, to both you and Sherry, and I appreciate this discussion this evening. You know, it is horrible what happened, and I think all of us watching that video were stunned. I know I felt that I wished I could go right into the video and push the officer off of George Floyd's neck, and it was stunning to see that there was not an action to do that, and I'm very glad that there are charges being brought this evening. Certainly, these kinds of things have gone on. They're too often and too long, and I understand the pain that people feel and the anger and the fear that people fear, and this has got to change. I do believe we're at a point now where there's an opportunity to do that. I think federally for us, even though decisions are made locally by local prosecutors and mayors and states and so on, we do provide federal funding, and it's very important that we make sure that we are tying that to more accountability, transparency, training. We are working as a Democratic caucus. I hope this will be bipartisan. Senator Cory Booker and Kamala Harris are leading us on a package of bills that would address those things. Let me also say that I released a report from the policy committee that I chair in the Senate on what's happening on the larger question of racial disparities. I mean, under COVID-19, racial disparities are on full display right now. And what happens with the lack of health care that creates a situation where, while we have 14% of our citizens in Michigan being African American, they comprise 40% of the deaths. When we look at housing and food disparities and job disparities, and we look at the fact that the majority of us can stay home and work from home because there are essential workers going in every day and keeping the economy going, keeping us safe, working in hospitals and nursing homes and so on. And disproportionately, these are people of color who may not find themselves being paid enough to even take care of their own family. And what happens when the school closes and you're an essential worker and you have to go to work anyway? And what do you do with your own child care needs? So there are a whole range of things, education, healthcare, economy, that have to be addressed. But immediately, we have to focus on what needs to happen in law enforcement, police reforms, and criminal justice reforms as a part of that.
Our next question is focused on the coronavirus and the toll it's taken on the American economy. People have been out of work for months, and Denise from Otisville, watching on WJRT, has a very simple question. She wants to know when, and I will include if, people will receive a second stimulus payment. Senator Peters?
Well, I think we have to see how things continue to unfold. Right now, I think one of the priorities that we're looking at is to make sure that those folks who find themselves unemployed can continue to put a roof over their head and put food on the table. There's currently unemployment assistance that is available, and part of the CARES Act and the pandemic response, which is something that I worked a great deal on, was to make sure that folks who couldn't normally get unemployment insurance could qualify for it. Folks who are small business owners, people who are part of the gig economy, are independent contractors, folks who drive Ubers, for example. These are people who were impacted in a major way and were facing a dire financial situation. Most families are in a very difficult situation. If you miss a paycheck, and if you miss two, you are in an incredibly serious position. So we wanted to make sure that those folks are taken care of. But also, we have to make sure our small businesses have the resources that they need in order to survive. We will all want this economy to open as quickly as possible and safely as possible. The way to do that is to make sure our small businesses survive. They are the engine of growth. They are the folks that create jobs and allow our local communities to prosper. And if they don't survive, a recovery in this economy will take a whole lot longer. And that's why we put in a paycheck protection program to make sure that employees could stay on the payroll. Those folks who found their company had to shutter their doors, so they could continue to stay on the payroll. That program needed to constantly be refined, and it's an example today in the Senate. We passed legislation along the lines of what was passed in the House in a bipartisan way. It passed unanimously. Democrats, Republicans came together to provide even more flexibility for those small businesses. So as we continue to assess where the economy is, how people are being impacted, small businesses and individual families, so we need to look at making the kinds of investments to make sure that we can get through this. We are facing a double punch here, a public health crisis and an economic crisis at the same time. And we also know that in order to get through the economic crisis, we have to treat the fundamental disease and the virus and the spread of this disease, and other investments we'll be making are related to testing and personal protection equipment. But I can say, at least as far as I'm concerned, to the question that was asked, that if the economy continues to need some stimulus to get back up on its feet, we're going to have to be prepared to do that. Because if the economy stumbles too much and goes into a deep recession, the recovery takes a whole lot longer and the cost is a whole lot longer. We have to be prepared to stand behind the American people to make sure we get through this together and have the financial wherewithal to get up on our feet as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Stabenow, your response to a second stimulus payment.
Well, I certainly support doing that, but I think there's a lot of other things that we need to do as well. And I want to thank Senator Peters for his leadership on the unemployment expansion for folks that are, single, small business owners, single proprietorships that normally wouldn't be able to get help during this pandemic, and the other folks that have been able to do that. And it's based on his legislation. So I want to thank him for that. But we also have to be thinking longer term about what people are going to need right now, whether it's food assistance. We've got folks coming into the food banks that folks have never seen before. They've never had to ask for help before. And so we need some increases in support under the supplemental nutrition program and some housing help for folks and the stimulus payment that was talked about. And also, I'm really pleased that as we were on the program this evening, that in fact the Senate did pass. Senator Peters and I have been working very hard to get this extension on the small business program, because we've got so many restaurants and folks in tourism and others that haven't been able to use the program because of the way it was originally set up. And so we've been working really hard. And while we were in the middle of the program, we got the word that we originally had some objections on the Republican side, and they lifted those, and we were able to actually get that done. So that's a good thing. But there's a number of things actually that need to happen for folks, because the truth of the matter is that through no fault of anyone's, when folks were told, if you're exposed, you got to stay home for 14 days and you lose a paycheck. And then the schools closed for all the right reasons to protect our children. And then you have to figure that out, right, as well, in terms of taking care of your children. And then your small business closes that you put your whole life into. And again, we understand all of that. This was about tackling and saving lives, which had to be the top priority. But now as we come out of this, and hopefully in a sensible way, so we're continuing to focus on health and saving lives, it's going to take a while. And the federal government has to be there to have people's backs as we come out of this.
All right, thank you both very much. Our next question is from Gary in Oscoda, and his question is about the rising waters in Michigan. He wants to know what's being done about our infrastructure here in our state in the wake of especially the flooding in mid-Michigan. You have 1 minute each for your answers. Senator Peters, we'll start with you.
Well, we have significant infrastructure needs all across the state that we have to invest in, and certainly we saw what happens when you don't maintain critical infrastructure in Midland with the failure of 2 dams that should have been maintained. It was a tragedy that could have been avoided. We can't let that happen ever again in any community in our state, and have to be making investments that are and build on what our parents and grandparents did. I will mention one particular area that I'm focused on is to make sure that we expand high-speed broadband internet. This pandemic has definitely shown that now that we're all on our various apps and communicating online, and as our students are being educated online, unfortunately, 1/3 of the students in our state don't have connectivity. They wouldn't be able to do their homework and do it in ways that are necessary, as well as new technologies like telemedicine, where we can actually provide healthcare services while people are in the comfort of their home and the safety of their home. These are the kinds of investments we need to make as a country to be a world-class economy. We have to make sure that everything is up to the standards that we're going to need to continue to lead the world.
All right, Senator, thank you very much. Senator Stabenow, I'm sorry, we only have a minute, so if you could quickly address the infrastructure needs.
Absolutely, Rick. Well, first of all, the person asking the questions from Oscoda, and certainly PFAS is an issue, and water quality and what's happening in the wells. And there's so many different challenges for us on water. We have a water infrastructure bill that is coming before the Senate. We're working to both have some help on PFAS, some help on erosion, as well as what happened in mid-Michigan that relates to the dams and so on, which is a very complicated, horrible situation as well. And then as the co-chair of the bipartisan Great Lakes Task Force, of course, I'm very, very focused on the bigger issues of protecting our Great Lakes.
Senators, both, thank you very much tonight. We appreciate you being here. That is all the time we have tonight. We want to thank everybody in our delegation. We've never had 10 members of the House all come together, both United States senators, to take the question from you, the voters.
That's right. We want to thank our viewers, and from all of us here at WLNS in Lansing and Wood TV in Grand Rapids, as well as WJMN and the Next Star Broadcasting Network, thank you so much for joining us.
And to our partner stations, Local 32 in Cadillac, WJRT in Flint, and Click on Detroit. A big thank you for being part of this and making it all statewide. A special thanks to you, Sherry, for our first joint venture as sister stations doing this. I hope this is the first of many and look forward to doing it again. Technology is interesting in the time of coronavirus, but thanks to a lot of hard work of the people at your station and ours, we were able to put it together. So thanks to the production crews from both WLNS and Wood TV. And thanks most of all to you, the viewers, for being with us tonight as we continue to keep you covered. Good night, everybody. Stay safe.